A very good morning to one and all present. I hope all of you are having a great, insightful time during the course. Now, it's an honor for us to welcome a leader whose journey exemplifies dedication, impact, and a vision for progress. Srimati Sayukta Samadar, a distinguished IAS officer. Known as the officer who took SDGs to every corner of Bharat, ma'am is an inspiration for young people seeking to make a change. Currently serving as Commissioner of the National Capital Region of India, she brings over 25 years of administrative experience from her roles such as Principal Secretary to the Government of Uttar Pradesh, District Magistrate across areas, and Advisor to Niti Aayog. Notably, during her tenure as advisor of Sustainable Development Goals at Niti Aayog, India's premier policy think tank, she spearheaded transformative initiatives that have been instrumental in localizing and monitoring the SDGs across the nation. Her leadership shows how dedication and vision can create real change. As we learn from her incredible journey, I'm reminded of the simple truth: the best way to predict the future is to create it. With great excitement, I invite ma'am to share her gems of wisdom to guide us forward. Before that, I'd also request Professor Vikas Thakur to felicitate ma'am. Ma'am, we're honored to have you. Your presence means so much.
Mic.
That will be restricted.
Have.
No, that will not work.
Which one do you want? Yes, sure.
Am I audible? Yeah, good. The presentation will be.
You can see.
Where will they see?
They will see.
आएगा?
They will start.
नहीं. That's what. So it's absolutely an honor for me to be in this prestigious IIT Kharagpur campus, for which I have to thank Professor Atanu Chaudhuri, who found me somewhere online, and obviously Vikas, Professor Vikas Thakur, who's been kind enough to have me over here. So thank you both of you. Thank you, Professor Chaudhuri. So yes, we've been working on sustainable development goals for a long time, ever since this agenda came into being in 2015. And today, see, you are all mostly, students who are working on sustainability, maybe doing your thesis, doing your PhD. But understand one thing, what I as a government officer have been doing is working on SDGs in the field, 25 years in the field, actually in districts of Uttar Pradesh and different states also. And also more and theorizing this and making it into a theory during my 7-8 years of work in Government of India, Niti Aayog. So now what I will take you, because you have been going through sustainability as part of, how the industry contributes to it, how the industry has to be oriented and aligned and integrated with the SDGs. But my picture will be a little different in terms of what as a country India is doing on not only on sustainability, but a larger framework where sustainability is just a part of it, which is called the Agenda 2030 Resolution for Sustainable Development, and it in short means the Sustainable Development Goals. right? So that will be mostly my work. It is actually the work that I have done. So this is no theory. This is no just talking from different books and literature review. This is actually work that we've done. So you all have heard about what preceded the Sustainable Development Goals? Yes. The Millennium Development Goals. And Millennium Development Goals, if you see, they had a very strong component of social and economic development only, and also it was not mandatory for all countries of the world. It was largely limited to, let's say, the Asia and the Africa parts of it. Around 2015, before 2015, there was a stock taking which happened, and it was realized that the world had failed in achieving these lofty social targets and human development targets of SDGs. And then finally a consensus started happening as to how does one replace that paradigm of development with a more holistic kind, more comprehensive framework of development. By that time, if you see the chronology, the Rio Protocol had happened, and sustainability and environmental sustainability was becoming a core component of all international dialogues. And that's when that entire 193 countries joined in, and then they signed that resolution. India was one of the major players during that resolution, which led to the forming of the SDGs. And that's when 2015 the Agenda for Sustainable Development was signed. And what it brought in, very important, it brought in all three major aspects of development. So it brought in the social and human, it brought in the economic and infrastructure, it brought in the environmental sustainability part of it, and what it also brought in is the partnerships point, which is goal 17. So this, if you see, it's basically the work of all governments. So as a government person, and across all governments, whether it's the central government, whether it's the state governments, everybody is working on these things, whether it's poverty, it's nutrition, it's health, education, gender, water, sanitation, electrification, blah, blah, blah. So these has always been the work of all governments, whether it's India, whether it's an African country, whether it's a European country, and so on. But what different did it bring in is this part from goal 11, sustainability. It brought in that entire element of environmental sustainability, particularly in the urban sector of sustainable cities. Then the circular economy and resource efficiency bit of it, which was never part of any international dialogue. The resource efficiency, which is goal 12. Climate action, which had become a very, very important thing after the UNFCCC and the entire COP conversations. Life below water, life on land. Now one important part it brought in, peace justice institutions was always there, partnership. Partnership, so the biggest problem of the MDGs was that the developing South always said that we never have the money to achieve these targets of MMR, reduce IMR, improve your, the renewable energy sector, and so on. So what partnerships goal categorically lays down is that 0.8% of GDP of the developed countries has to be contributed as part of official development assistance. That's number one. It never happens. That's a secondary thing. Number two, technology transfer. Because whatever it is with advanced ultra supercritical, in thermal, shift to electric vehicles, all this requires a massive technology transfer. That became a part of it. And the third point was capacity building. Because we may have a lot of infrastructure, but capacity still need to be augmented on a continuous basis. So this was largely it. If you can see, there are 17 sustainable development goals which are broken down into 169 targets. Now these as part of that resolution. So now these targets are basically, each goal is divided into several targets, and these targets are outcomes. These are not inputs anymore. Just say what used to happen pehle? If it's a school education department, how many schools have you constructed? How many teachers have you kind of inducted? Now those are no more the criteria for evaluating SDGs. So now it's like, what is the improvement in the educational learning of the students? What is the gender parity? So basic, now everything has moved towards these outcomes. These are all the 169 targets. And obviously it addresses everything. I'm not going to read out the slides. So what does it imply? Basically, again, this is a little bit of theory for you to understand what SDGs are as opposed to just sustainability. So this is basically the concerns are people, planet, partnership, peace and prosperity. I'll just move beyond here. These are all the goals, if you can see, right? So poverty, this is what I was mentioning. These are all the goals in front of you over there. The 1 to 5 is entirely human and social aspect of development. 6 to 9 is economic and infrastructure. It talks about decent work, improved LFPRs, reduced wage gaps, work conditions, better connectivity, digital, physical and financial, all those things. 10 is reduce inequalities in any country, and then 11 to 15 is basically the environmental, and finally we have 17, which is the partnership goal. So this is the crux of it. Now how does the world see this entire thing? So in the world it was like when the 2015 agenda was kind of unveiled, that's when the Prime Minister also went and remarked that the world will achieve SDGs only when India is able to make a breakthrough in that. Obviously with that, 1.4 billion population and blah blah. So how does one take it? So the agenda started in New York. It was signed in New York. Then finally it was brought down to, I don't know why it's not coming. Beach ka ek slide thoda gayab ho gaya. So then it comes down to the national level, which is New Delhi, the central government, and from the central government then it is taken down to all the state governments in India, and further to the level of, so we have 36 states and union territories, so all these governments, and then finally to the over 700 districts in our country. So this is broadly the journey of how the SDGs from global was translated into a national level, then a subnational level, and then to the level of a complete local government. So what's the institutional structure that we started with? So we had, because you see, these are all multiple goals dealing with different sectors, health, education, industry, forest, so on. So all this is dealt with in the central government through separate ministries, right? And even in the different states, it's dealt with by different ministries. Now the biggest problem in any government scenario is that one ministry will not talk to the other ministry at all. So there will be complete silos. Nobody will encourage another ministry to enter into your turf, and there will be a complete turf war at every level. So given the fact that the SDGs were very intricately indivisible, what was realized is that these outcomes will be achieved only when there is one agency which will give that much necessary coherence. And that is why a dedicated institution was there. Planning Commission, you've heard of Planning Commission? Planning Commission in 2014 changed into Niti Aayog, National Institution for Transforming India. It was a nomenclature change, plus it was a functional change as well. So that we will leave for discussions later on what was the functional change. Anyways, so Niti Aayog was made the anchor agency for SDGs, and how we did it, I joined this organization in 2017. Until then, we knew that nothing much was happening. I mean, there was 2015 mein to it had just come, 2016 mein the allocation of business rules was made, and finally by the time we reached there, what we tried to do over the years is how does one make the SDGs the center focus of policy making in a federal country where you know that different states do not have the same government or political party in power as in the central government. So the priorities are different. Center will say ye karo, state government will say hum to nahi karenge, hum to kuch aur karenge, right? So that is the general psyche in between state and center, and with that how does one ensure ki jo the commitment which central government has, how does one translate that commitment into a national commitment, build consensus across states. That was our biggest challenge there. How we did it? By creating two things. Competition. You know, Indians love competition. We love to compete anywhere we go. You guys put in US, you will be the topmost students everywhere, right? So we are a very competitive lot. So the same psyche we played on कि ठीक है competition कराएंगे different states में. So that's one thing. A competition karayenge, then you understand what happens. A Tamil Nadu and Kerala will be way better than a Bihar and an Uttar Pradesh. So there'll always be a disgruntlement between the good performing and the bad performing. So an element of collaboration as well. And also the realization that the government alone can't do all this. Gender equality, we've always been terrible at that. We've always fared red in gender equality. Why? Because Khali legislation will not be able to, legislation and central sponsored schemes can't do justice to such a societal factor like this. Therefore, bringing in the whole of society approach. So this is largely the legislative framework that we have. You can see the legislative and executive framework for SDGs in the country. You have the parliament on top, Niti Aayog beech mein, then there is a CAG which gives an oversight, which always reviews what the country is, how you are working on the SDGs and so on. Then there are the various line ministries, the Ministry of Statistics which deals with the data, Ministry of Panchayati Raj which works on the SDGs at the Gram Panchayat level. Now some are doing well, some are obviously, and this is at the state level as well, right? So how we work on the SDGs is basically you saw there was 169 targets. Now these 169 outcome targets, if you see you can just Google, you'll have all that entire resolution will be there. So these 169 targets are further subdivided into indicators, right? Because it can't be a theory and it can't be an anecdotal. But is the health system in India improving? Maternal and child health? Yes, I think so. So it can't be anecdotal. It has to be based and backed by evidence from the ground across the country. Therefore, there are these outcome indicators. There are 234 outcome indicators globally, and the agenda says that every country needs to customize it, nationalize it based on their geopolitics and development context and all. So therefore, we have a national indicator framework. Right now we have something like, we started with 300, we've come down to 290. States then were told, we worked with the states ki aap bhi apna banao, because a state like, let's say Kerala would have very different trajectory compared to a Himachal Pradesh or compared to a, let's say, a northeastern state. So their realities were different. Every state was supposed to then contextualize it. So therefore, we have the state indicator framework, and then boiling down to district indicator framework. That took off only in some states, so I'll not go much into that. So now, this was the structure, and now I will tell you the process. So you've understood all about the structure that is existing in the country for the SDGs. Now I will tell you what we did in order to kind of make the SDGs integrated with not only the national level policy making, but at the state level and further at the level of the districts, which is known as that entire model of SDG localization. This was highly appreciated in UN headquarters when we presented it way back in 2020 or 21, something like that. Yeah. So it's based on these 4 pillars. You can see creating institutional ownership, having a monitoring mechanism, developing capacities, and promoting whole of society. So this is the institutional ownership. I've already told you, one ministry alone will only work on, let's say, poverty, will not talk about industry. The energy ministry will never talk about taking it to the rural areas. So that entire lack of coordination is sorted by having a dedicated institution both at the national level and also at the level of states, right? So all it does is the functions is all mentioned over there. So it becomes basically the mother and father of SDGs, doing everything on that in the country. Second is obviously creating a robust monitoring and reviewing mechanism. What happened so far? I don't think you've had much of a flavor of how the government works, but how it works generally is that our reviewing system used to be, 5 years ago, it used to be very skewed. We were measured on only 2 parameters. What is the allocation of your department budget and have you utilized it or not? Very simply put, agar aapne budget utilize nahi kiya hai, then you are a 3rd grade officer, right? That's one thing. Second thing is, with that budget, what were you supposed to do? Were you supposed to build some hospitals? Were you supposed to, kind of induct doctors? How many machines were you supposed to procure in hospitals? So basically, the money utilization and the money is being used for what kind of activities and inputs. That was the crux of any government monitoring system across the entire country. That is what changed after the SDGs came in, because SDGs gave us outcomes. It gave us indicators in the form of outcomes, and these outcomes are not just, kitna teachers you've hired, how many doctors you've hired, but actually is the anemia level in women declining? Is the stunting and wasting among children under 5, is it going down? So basically the crux became a very different scenario, and that was completely alien to all departments. Departments never knew ki what is all this. Departments were going mad. Ki hame ye de kya rahe ho aap? What are we supposed to do with all this? So therefore, creating this monitoring system, I'll come to all the public policy tools that we created. Basically, how does one completely enact a shift in the existing government of India and government of states ka reviewing and monitoring system by creating new public policy tools in the public domain. Obviously then developing capacities at different levels. This was a arduous and painful effort, but it was a very prolonged and intensive effort that we did with all states, and then bringing in all society, all communities basically in this entire platform. So a little bit of how we did the whole of society approach. You can see these are generally, you can very clearly identify that these are the marginalized, underprivileged communities, and we brought in over a span of a year also CSOs, several CSOs, over 1,000 CSOs working on these areas to bring in that entire feedback which Government of India never had. So you see, in any government we work on a distrust. Generally we don't trust the civil society. And it is like that. We will use civil society agar kuch chota mota kaam karna hai, otherwise beyond that we don't. This was the first time this entire change was affected, and a trust building, a listening exercise was done ki bataiye what are the flaws in our system so that we can kind of do something with it. Secondly, obviously, as I told you, working with the state governments had tremendous resistance. Absolutely, they hated us ki why have you brought us a new paradigm of monitoring, measuring. Aap log ka kam review karte hain that you have to review us on even more items across the entire development sector. So this is what we had to go to all the states and work with all chief ministers. So what we realized is one very strange thing, that agar hum capacity building mid level mein karte hain, it makes no sense. Capacity building has to be done at the top level. The political head has to understand the merit of the SDG framework. Once they understood, that appetite came ki now this has to percolate down, then the entire state machinery kind of moved towards working on the SDGs. This is one part because it's the IIT. I'll just take a little more of time. How the private sector, so see, civil society ho gaya, then the government at all levels ho gaya. The biggest challenge was how does one make the private sector, the business sector aware that SDGs is also something which is their core activity, and you cannot limit SDGs to only your what? CSR. 10,000 crores per annum, 20,000, now it has gone to what? 40,000 crores is spent last year or something on the corporate social responsibility. So this took a lot of exercise. I'll go into that basically. How we had to sit with Ministry of Corporate Affairs, wo sir bata rahe the na, IICA and all. So we had to literally sit in IICA and work this through one full year. Now private companies, what do they have to report on? They have the annual report and they have their financial statements, that's it. Sustainability was never a part of it. So then and they were always against it. हमें नहीं करना, हम खाली CSR करेंगे and we will just tell you what money we've used in buying let's say ambulance, creating some ICDS centers, creating some schools and so on. This is what we were never interested in. So what we tried to do was bring in that first framework came in, the National Guidelines on Responsible Business Conduct. That is this thicker report finally came out. It was basically 9 principles all aligned to the concerning SDGs, whether it's your work condition, whether it's sourcing, whether it's value chain, the entire set of core operations, non-core operations, how business has to align itself with the SDGs. Then that became the framework for the first one, the BRSR framework, Business Responsibility and Sustainability Framework report framework. This is then became after a lot of push, and you know how difficult it is to get something done in Government of India, particularly if where the private sector is concerned. Business sector mein if you tell ki we are going to increase your reporting burden, it is a massive problem. But whatever said and done, that was through a lot of, you know, CII was brought in, FICCI was brought in, all the industry associations were brought in, and we were able to make this compulsory. SEBI made it compulsory for the top 1000 listed companies. This happened long ago. Since then also there has been no movement in this regard, because there was that continuous thing that we have to make it mandatory for all listed companies, not just the top 1000, but it is still a challenge. Whatever said and done, this work has happened, and this was a big, like let me say a big step in the Indian context. So if you see, this is like the theory of it. So we have the needs. You can see the Venn diagram here. This is the needs that a country has. Now these needs and these gap areas are very clearly identifiable through our SDG India Index, which I will talk about in a while, which I'll show you. Now there are the policy priorities. Policy priorities could be like right now, one of the policy priorities for Government of India would be what? Electric, shifting into a, you know, the energy transition bit. In the social sector, it could be the care economy, because the number of senior citizens is rising. Again, renewable ho gaya, care economy, early childhood education ho gaya. So there are certain policy priorities which are set, which are kind of narrated everywhere, right? This is your needs which are identifiable. These are the gap areas, like nutrition, major gap area. Again, energy transition, major gap area. Now these are how the business interacts with them, is basically finding the policy white spaces. Now wherever it becomes a white space, that becomes white space which is also proven business model and a policy priority. This juncture becomes your investment opportunity areas for the private sector companies. I'll give you a very simple example of it. So very recently, if you have seen how IKEA is coming up, right? IKEA is coming up in Noida, Greater Noida, in several parts of the country and all. So what was identified is, one of them is basically how policies are basically, you know, tweaked. So workers have to be like at 50% women. So that one kind of a policy thrust. Otherwise IKEA had no reason to do it, but it was kind of seen that this could be a good opportunity, and it merges with our needs also, and it merges with our policy priorities also. Then local vendors from a part of local vendor, you know, procurement would be done from women entrepreneurs, would be done from underprivileged communities, and so on. Then again, simple thrusts like shared cab service. So if you see Gurgaon, several companies in Gurgaon mandatory have a shared cab service, especially for women, so that the hours and, you know, the safety of it gets taken care of. And you don't have it in all companies also. So Bangalore might not have it, but Gurgaon might have it, depending on countries. So this is largely what the theory of how the spaces are kind of investment opportunities came up. This is one of the ways it's done. And gradually, if you see, the sustainability regulations also and disclosure requirements have been increasing. So you can see this like, it's almost like, you know, much of it believes that our sustainability reporting is simply greenwashing. It is not as strong as it should be, and the focus is merely on the ESG. I'll come to it. So this is also how the legislation to a large extent needs to increase, and is also gradually increasing, more so in the global sector, which I'll just come to that. So globally what is said is basically the SDGs are there, and the SDGs are the targets which have to be achieved by government and companies, you know, across the entire spectrum. One of the simple ones, if you can see, is the UN regulations on business and human rights. So you've heard about that? Yes. So that is like the beginning of it. But then what happened, eventually there was a shift in terms of ESG. What are our inputs in environmental and social and governance basically targets and challenges, which will offset what? Which will offset our investment risks and so on. So now this shift, if you can see, is happening away from the ESG also, because ESG is just efforts. It's not impact as yet. So now the movement is happening towards assessing and measuring the impact, whether it's positive, it's negative, it's direct, it's indirect, on all the presence of all the regulations that we have and all the disclosures that companies have to make after effecting changes in their entire corporate governance, in their entire value chain. What is it leading to any impact or not? So this is largely the discourse in that entire business sector, which I am sure your professors have been talking about over the the entire course. Now this is interesting, because this is what we've been doing in the government. See how the focus has been changing from input activity to output. So input would be what? The CSR money. Activity would be what? Buying some, let's say, equipment, some ambulance and all that, or affecting some capacity building, some training things and all. But finally the output is more important, and this is what has happened in the government now. At least 5 to 10 years ago this has happened. But the business sector is, again, in terms of the impact which it's creating on the social side, on the environmental side, this is a bigger challenge of how does one measure output and outcomes in the business sector. I think this is one of the areas where there's a lot of kind of talks happening, but we are yet to see something like a uniform, comprehensive framework. And I'll show you how many frameworks are there. This is crazy. So this is like, more about, because now if you see the kind of frameworks that are existing globally, some of the frameworks are huge. I'll come to that slide as well. So the private sector, the business sector is actually, there are two contrary views. I am not siding with any view. I am just laying it in front of you. What is the one view is that it's not enough. Whatever the business sector is doing in terms of activities of reorienting their value chains, in terms of the procurement, in terms of capacity building, in terms of corporate governance, it is not enough. We do not have data, adequate data to measure what is the impact of these activities. Secondly, accountability. There is not much of an accountability also. So where is the accountability? Kya hai? Only financial statements and so on. So there's no accountability, hardcore accountability on companies. Obviously the risks increase because of that, because of ESG. There's lack of transparency in your ESG activities and all. So this is one view. The second view is obviously from the business sector. You will hear that already bahut hai. We are dying under the burden of regulations. We are dying under the the burden of disclosures. So this kind of a view exists. These contrary view exists. Somewhere in the near future, it will all merge down to a happy equilibrium, which we always believe is the law of economics. Too much, not too much. It will all come down to one particular equilibrium, definitely. Now, what I was telling you about the regulatory frameworks. Can you see the plethora of regulatory frameworks? And this is all globally. So we were discussing that it's a complex web. What do companies need to follow? Sustainability outcomes mein, financial mein itna. So where does, how does a company in India, which is tied up to global value chain in whatever way, how do they realize that what are the rules and regulations that need to be followed actually, and what are the disclosures that need to be made? So different tools, different targets, objective remain the same, but then that level of capacity building, the level of maturity, that is a big challenge area even today. So I was attending certain, again these conferences where you would have seen some of the biggest legislation come from the European Union, right? So there is the carbon-based adjustment mechanism. Then there is the corporate sustainability due diligence directive. All these regulations are going to get mandatory. They are becoming mandatory by 26, 27 and so on. So how do companies in India actually gear themselves up, improve their capacities also to not only affect those changes, implement those changes, and then also to do that, that entire reporting, because finally compliance burden is going to increase, it has increased in a big way. So these are some of the challenges which are taking place in the private sector. But what is important is that, India has, I'll just come back to the Indian context, this is largely the global context. Indian context where we still have a lot more to go, because we just have the BRSR framework for reporting, which is also very limited to 1,000 companies. Usme bhi a lot of greenwashing takes place. Let's be honest at that level. Largely companies have to do it because of two major reasons. If you have to tap into that investment pool, jo globally aa raha hai, then you don't have a choice, you have to do it, and therefore you will see a lot of people getting into sustainability areas in the private sector. All big companies have a sustainability wing and sustainability officers who have to do this. Somewhat you have to do that entire regulation and compliance bit. Second thing is also of your own merit, because if you do these, follow these voluntary sustainability standards and so on, then aapki brand value bhi badhti hai. If your brand value is increasing, then you are also getting the trust of consumers, and you can also tap into new areas of market. So both things together, and I'm sure there'll be companies do find, big companies definitely have found that there is proven profit model also by following this entire regime. So with that, I will just end with the entire, the business sector. So any questions so far? Then I'll just take a sip of water and I'll move on to what we in Government of India did as per creating that, that public policy, two major public policy tools, which I would like to show you as to how we brought in this entire SDG and mainstreamed it and integrated it into our way of thinking at every level in the government. So anything so far?
Ma'am, I have a question. When you showed that Indian map, Jammu and Kashmir, West Bengal, and I think Andhra Pradesh, that was out. I mean, it was
West Bengal, then nobody called us, no. They refused to call us. Andhra Pradesh we did. Telangana, you were saying
Telangana, yes.
And that was also covered, the map is not colored.
So ma'am, all these you do not have the data.
No, we have data of everything.
Then?
We have data. We just didn't go. I personally didn't go there.
Okay,
I just personally didn't come to Calcutta for this, because you know how dynamics between central government and state government works.
Yes.
And Jammu Kashmir we did, not Ladakh.
Okay.
Ladakh was missable. Yeah.
Okay,
Yes,
Good
please.
morning, ma'am. Thank you for your presentation, because I feel governance is a very, very important part of the delivery mechanism. So I have a question for you, or your observation is that, you mentioned about this central state going down to the panchayat. Now coming from the industry, we are looking at, objective ways of measurement of outcome, which you said. So like we often see that, when we are burdened with lot of reports, everything, it becomes a kind of compliance thing. And, the actual, the effect, it's more like, अरे ये भर देना है,
भर के
भेजना
दे
है,
दो,
हाँ,
छुट्टी
दे दो
करो।
है. But, down to the impact to the society with which the intention is, how much is it actually getting, also manifested, also depends down the line on the last mile of delivery mechanism. Okay, so policies might be brilliant, but how it is affected, and specifically in the governance sector, there are, in these gram panchayats, etc., there are also, those, municipality people who are more, like answerable to their masters, political masters. So how does it translate on the ground? I mean, you are starting with an intention, okay, that intention, and going down the level, it is more about what is in it for me, because that's how, it works out in the, down the line. And how is it, how can it be manipulated? I mean, down the line. I mean, like manipulated in the sense that whether it, ये हमारे काम का अगर I can actually utilize it for political purposes, I mean, some kind of thing. And how do you actually, kind of get over that?
That's an interesting question. I think it should be explained during the course of how I show you how we went from the national level to the state level down to that absolutely low level. So what we followed was, see, we are a small organization sitting in Delhi with me and a team of, let's say, 6 or 7 people. What we had to do was create these public policy tools which would throw out information and data about development at the bottommost level. That when it went to the public domain, apne aap it created wonders because people got to know, and people meaning academia, research institutes, universities, industry, everybody got to know about the level of development and about the, you know, the reality, let me say the reality of our government schemes and government policies at that bottom level. I think that was one of the big ways that we could deal with it because again, and that was the utility of it would depend on the team working in the districts. So I'll come to how we managed all this at the level of districts as well in terms of trying to improve the situation at those bad districts. So we have all that data with us. We were able to project all that data with the chief ministers, with the chief secretaries, and at the level of district magistrates and collectors as well, who were helming at the level of districts. Some of the good ones used it, the bad ones obviously don't bother, so that you can't affect changes, you know, in 6 and 7 years in the entire country, but at least you can create a system which will be transparent, which will be evidence based, which will be data backed, and which people in the place cannot deny it, you cannot wash away it. So I'll just go on with this and then you can have a look at how we did it. So this is monitoring. The second most biggest pillar of our work has been monitoring SDGs and taking it from the national to the absolutely local level. How we did it? Please Google this. This is the SDG India Index and Dashboard. This is the public policy tool we created way back in 2018. India became the first country in the entire world to have its own government-made public policy tool to track SDGs, and not only at the national level, at the state level. So that there have been all these versions which have come up, and it's been hailed all over by the UN system and everybody. So it's all there. So the method of doing it, I'll just quickly, because you know you are all doing stats and everything. So it's basically identifying the indicators from that basket of 300 indicators. Normalizing the values 0 to 100, basically the trajectory of distance covered. Weightage is equal given to same because that's the SDG theory. Again, individual goal score and composite score, arithmetic mean use hua tha isme. So this is again an established methodology done by SDSN standard also, which measures which ranks all countries of the world on SDGs. India ka rank hamesha kharab hi rehta hai. So clearly see the performance. Now how does one, 2018 when the first one was released, so it's a 0 to 100 scale and the achievers are 100, blue, koi achiever nahi hai. Front runner is green, 65 to 99, and performer is 50 to 64, and the reds are the worst, right? Jinka half bhi cover nahi hua hai, not even half of the distance to the target covered. So the first time when we released it, we did a lot of consultations, told the states this is what we are doing, this is the methodology. We took all feedback mechanism se hua tha pura consultative process se, and then the first one was released. UP, Bihar, Assam were red and across the entire SDG frame. So individual scores, gold scores, totally they were red. And obviously you can see when this happened, suddenly when this comes out all over your TV channels, your news, your newspapers, vernacular media, everywhere, what happened? Tremendous amount of fight between Nitish Kumar and what's his name? Lalu Prasad's son? Tejasvi Yadav. The continuous, rampant fire wars happening and all kinds of things ki dekho, inke sarkar ne inhone kuch nahi kiya. So political rivalries came up in a big way, people noticed it. My point is our job was done when we came out with it, ki now lado, fight. Here also in UP also Akhilesh Yadav and Yogi Adityanath fighting and giving all kinds of bites ki dekho tumne kuch nahi kiya and all that. So now it caught the imagination of the chief ministers across the country. And Tamil Nadu, Kerala was first, so Kerala was celebrating, had hoardings all across Delhi, in Kerala, everywhere, that look, government of India has ranked us #1. So we have to done it, arrived. So what I meant to say is that once you throw it in the public domain and you are transparent about it, you've done it in a consultative process, there are takers. Everybody took it very well. तो क्या हुआ in between this year and that year, everybody, all the chief ministers, bhai aa jao, Sanyukta, wherever you are, come, do a technical capacity building, chief secretaries, pura bureaucracy बैठ गया. Assam, Himanta Biswa Sharma became the chief minister. He said ki no, my bureaucracy will not do much, you will teach my council of ministers also. So we had full detailed presentations with the council of ministers, with the entire bureaucracy, teaching them, bhai ye karna hai. So, so then they also affected that shift. They started monitoring what we were monitoring as outcomes. They stopped bothering about ki road kitna ban gaya. They had to monitor ki how many hamlets are still unconnected. So those kind of things, that entire shift happened in 1 year in terms of what the state governments then started prioritizing were the things outcomes which we were highlighting in our reports. This happened. You can see some of the southern states moving very fast, right? And ye bhi bach gaye. I mean, red hone se bach gaye. Dheere dheere, you can see how the difference has been happening in terms of over the years. So this is clear cut. Now this is, see, we understand that narrative, we understand that the southern states are doing better than the northern states. Where is the data? We have to understand the analytics of it. Everywhere the numbers count, measurability counts, reliability of that data counts in a big way. And let me tell you here, we did not take the data for all these indicators from ministries. The first thing we avoided is ministry se data nahi lenge. Water, sanitation data, toilets, access to toilets. So what the ministry told us, 100% ho gaya. Oh, come on, yeah. I mean, I work in UP, I understand what it is. So we didn't take that. We said, okay. And then we had a huge fight with drinking water and total sanitation secretary, Mr. Param Iyer. I had a personal fight with him. We will not take your data. What we took was survey data, proper survey data, national survey data, and then we got them third party verified by all the UN agencies. So you wouldn't believe, sanitation data where the ministry tells me 100% covered hai, saturated with toilets, the actual number is 30% are still deprived. So we took that. So we were also very bold. Thankfully I had a good boss and we were very bold in coming out with all these real bad numbers, which then actually, then people realize that you can't get away with it. You can't shy away and you can't throw things under the carpet here and there. So this is again the last, the final one which is here. Again Bihar, Jharkhand and the northeastern 2 states. ये यहाँ पे है, I think there's something happened with the slide, I think. 2020? Oh, 22, 23, I left Niti Aayog. So I left Niti Aayog and then they stopped it and then they couldn't do it. And then there was a lot of shifts also. Mr. Param Iyer had become CEO, he was also sent out. So political things, a lot of political things. And then finally it happened in 23, 24. So it is not only a pictorial representation which is interesting. What is interesting in India is who's first and who's last. That makes the whole world of change here, right? So Kerala, Uttarakhand would always tie, I mean Kerala would always come first, but this time Uttarakhand also tied over there. And you can see these states would always remain bad. So every time there is a clamor among the states and there's a huge sense of competition. What I'm trying to say is this led to a huge sense of competition among states and states started taking it very seriously. And then that's how we were able to ensure that uske baad central government stopped working on the SDGs. The states are majorly carrying out. This is your union territories and so on. Now that is the area, right? That's the state perspective. Now what we come to, how is India doing across the sectors? This is more important. Now this graph, imagine we have for all the states. So what when we show to each chief minister and each secretary, we show them, ye to dekho India ka hai. Now compare it with your state. So every state ka head knows where we are going bad and where we are doing it properly. So this is India. And this you can see hunger has been one of the problem areas, reds. simple numbers, 52% of women suffering from anemia, then 30 to 35% of children under 5, even now suffering from stunting and wasting. Bad numbers here. Gender equality, really a problem area across the years, which we all have to kind of go by that. What is interesting here is see the positives. Because of whatever the impact of several schemes across the country, you can see the spikes in water, in energy, in urban infrastructure, smart cities, so on. This gives a narrative of how the country is moving, whether things are going down, whether things are improving, what are the critical areas. Now you also have to admit that from 1 to 5, these are social dimensions. एक साल में change नहीं आता. These require intergenerational period for showing even a little bit of change. So this is largely it. Now I'll quickly move through these. So I was talking about districts. So this is what we did with the 120 districts of the northeastern region, 8 states, because there is a separate donor ministry. We suddenly can't do it for everybody, right? So what we did with the big states, we told them, you do your district ranking yourself. Because see, national indicators would be very different from state level indicators. State level ka reality would be different. So states were encouraged, and we worked with the states. We gave them all the capacities to do your district ranking. But 8 states of Northeast, tough zone to work in, so we did it for them. Again, the same kind of ranking. Clear. What is interesting in this is, on the basis of this NER district, which we also called it the NERD index. So short form, a NERD index. So on the basis of this, a scheme was created. It's called the PM Divine scheme. Don't ask me the full form of divine. What it does is it allocates a certain amount of some 10,000 crores or something for the development, for project formulation, project sanctioning and development of these districts. So these districts here, you can see they are all green and yellow. But if you see individual goal ka jab dekhoge, for example, if you see goal 2, goal 3, nutrition, education, then physical connectivity, there will be several districts of Arunachal which will be totally red. So an objective criteria of allocation of funds was created through this PM Divine scheme based on this. Cities, taking it down to the level of the cities, you were asking. So we did the same thing for tracking how cities are working on SDGs. And SDG, there is this particular goal which we often confuse, goal 11, sustainable urban cities. So Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, which is our dusra ministry of Housing always measured cities based only on goal 11. For the first time we told them, bhaiya aise nahi hota, poverty wahan bhi hota hai. Education is also a problem there, nutrition is also a problem there, climate resilience is also important there. Not only transport, but there are many things all across the SDGs, how women are facing safe spaces or unsafe spaces, all these things are issues there. That's when we developed this, the ranking of cities. Shimla was number 1. Yeah, this is the top 10, yeah. I don't try to put the bottom 10, then you'll all feel offended, whoever comes from the bottom 10 cities. Okay, so that's the SDG India index for you, by which that public policy tool across the years, we have kind of made sure that everybody is aware of it, and it gives a very true, real picture of the state's performance. A very small anecdote here. So we were having this Mr. Jagan Reddy, the Chief Minister of Andhra, very handsome guy, no? So he gave us a time of, let's say, 15 minutes he gave us a time. 15 minutes mein you have to come and explain. Okay, fair enough. We've done the entire presentations and workshops with the entire bureaucracy, chief secretary and all. When he started seeing it, very crisp, I made just a 10 slider for him. 10 slider mein he realized, bloody hell, so much of DBT he has done, where is it leading to? Because that state was very bad in education. He kept on arguing, Arey, I am sending money to the mothers of children. So yeah, you can keep sending mothers to the children. You've made attendance compulsory for the teachers are feeding wrong data. Very clearly. So he had some of the worst parameters across the sectors in which he was doing big time DBT. And that time he didn't realize it, so he lost the election anyways. So it becomes an eye opener for policymakers, and if they want to take action, they take action. If they don't want to take action, good for you. That's up to you. So the next one, this is a very interesting one. How many of you have heard about multidimensional poverty? See, you will go back enriched with this. So poverty across countries, in India also, it's measured how? As of now, what do you, anybody, how is poverty measured? Per capita income, no. It's measured by that consumption expenditure. How much a person or a household spends to consume on a basket of consumption items, right? Based on that, it determined how much of income you should have per month or something, na hota tha na 2000 something or something like that, to be able to qualify as above poverty line. So below poverty line is always an income which a family has in order to qualify as BPL or APL, right? Globally also this is money metric poverty based on the per capita consumption expenditure. It's now the numbers, you must have heard about the term $1 a day. Anybody who earns $1 a day, right? Poor, less than $1 a day, poor. So this World Bank also has the same money metric poverty, and from $1 a day I started working at $1 a day, now I am at $2.95 a day. So that also has increased to $2.95 a day. Now, suppose India's poverty line, do you know poverty line last India ka kab nikla tha? 2011. Yes, 2011. So we have not had a BPL estimate since 2011, we are in 2024, okay? And with that, 22% of India's population is below poverty line, okay? So now, as a public, let's say as an administrator, this is your below poverty line ka number, 22% is below poverty line, right? If you are given a budget of, let's say, 1,000 crores and you are told, please use it only for the poorest of the poor, how will you track the poorest of the poor? This is your line. Can anybody track? Identify the poorest? This is a conjecture. You are right. You are in the right direction. Absolutely. BPL mein ye milega estimate. 22% of India's population is below poverty line. You have the same number for different states. Let's say 8% here, 10% there. With that, actually the problem is you cannot identify the poorest of the poor, because yahan se leke yahan tak everybody qualifies as BPL, right? Number one. Number two, you are again given 1,000 crores and you are told, please put it in those schemes which will uplift these poor. What will you do? Commonsensically, you will put it in, let's say, in rural livelihoods and this and that, right? There is no data-backed method in this below poverty line estimates to understand what is causing that poverty. That's when somewhere Amartya Sen capability, human capability approach and all, you've heard about all that though. Since that was the inception of something called multidimensional poverty, and this way in 2005, 2006, in Oxford University, there is a think tank, Oxford Poverty Human Development Initiative. Their economists, Dr. Sabina Al-Khair and James Foster, they came up with this concept of multidimensional poverty index. Since then, from 2010 onwards, 110 countries of the world are measured and ranked in terms of the incidence and intensity of multidimensional poverty. And India ka halat ye hai ki even, I think, yeah, even now, Afghanistan and Pakistan are below it. Even Sri Lanka and Bangladesh are above, better than India in multidimensional poverty index. So we started to, we were able to convince the Prime Minister's office कि अब BPL तो आप करेंगे नहीं, BPL आप करेंगे, BPL estimates निकालेंगे तो maybe you don't want to, the government never wanted to do BPL estimates. So we thought कि okay, let's try to do something else, because the world over, this is accepted in World Bank as well, World Bank and IMF. So let's try to do something, a new multidimensional poverty, maybe the numbers will be better. So that was our way of driving it, and this is what we did. What is this concept? So global multidimensional poverty index It is released every year with the UNDP का HDR report. HD report पता है ना, Human Development Report. With that, the rankings are released at the back of it. And what it does, it measures poverty in terms of deprivation in 3 pillars. So it's health, education and standard of living divided into, so 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 weight. Every pillar has these indicators: nutrition, child mortality, maternal health is an Indian indicator, years of schooling, school attendance and all your standard of living. Then they get further divided into equal weights within that pillar. And this is perfectly linked with the, synced with the SDGs as well. So this is how global multidimensional poverty index is calculated based on deprivations. Now certain key concepts in that. Ye dekho. So now this we did, the first one was in 2015 and the second version was in 2021. These are done on the basis world over, because it's a standard world metric, it is done based on the demographic and health survey. Every country has a DHS. These are internationally, globally comparable, fairly very robust, and in India the DHS is the National Family Health Survey, okay, done by that Institute of Population Studies in Bombay. Yeah. So now, how does it fare? So certain scores, MPI score, the higher the worse, obviously. Head count ratio, what will you understand by head count ratio? How many are poor in the country? Intensity, how poor are the poor? So what it does is, so you can see in 2015 you can see the comparable numbers. 1 in 4 Indian was multidimensionally poor. That has reduced to 14%, right? Intensity क्या है कि on this weighted average, if a family is on that weighted average of all these indicators is deprived on more than 33%, then it will qualify as multidimensionally poor. So if your intensity is 47, so 50% से ऊपर severe poverty होता है, and then something like that, there is a gradation in the thing, 75% से ऊपर तो absolute poverty हो जाता है. So this is what it is, right? Now can you see how the states functioned? So again the states which were doing badly on SDGs, doing badly here. Commonsensical. So these are commonsensical things, but we know that this is data based. Now the second thing what I would like to show you here is this part, how we take it to the district level. Now see, this is where the ability of creating these public policy tools and taking it down to that grassroots, that becomes so important. When I used to be district magistrate and collector, I have done collectorship in 10 districts of Uttar Pradesh, I never had this kind of information. इतना information हमारे पास कभी नहीं था. We were just hitting in the, you know, common sensically. एक गांव में जा रहे हैं, देख रहे हैं कि ओहो यहाँ drinking water नहीं है, तो we will think कि drinking water पूरे district में नहीं है. So we were just acting on the basis of intuition. Sometimes the intuitions worked, sometimes they didn't work. But taking MPI to the level of finding the estimates for intra-state, this shows that in one particular state you can have reds and greens all coexisting at the same time. Therefore, any policy cannot, even a state level policy will not work for the entire state. You have to take into account district level nuances as well. What it did, again, so we are so very cruel on that, we would start naming rightly, you know, numbering karenge 1 to 1 se leke 10 tak. So when this is very interesting. So when this result came out, so memes started happening. ये तो आया हमारा कब 2021 में निकला, memes आ गए कि oh thank God Bihar is number 1 in some ranking of Niti Aayog. We were like, okay, go slow. Bihar is number 1, but it's the worst. Again, poverty is the highest over there. So I remember Nitish Kumar sir refused to see me when we went to kind of present him the report and do a complete analysis. Show him a little, brief him about it. He refused to see me. He called up my boss in Delhi and said, what the hell is she doing again and again? So ये सब drama चलता रहता था. But see how. So now you see the dark blues are 2021 NFHS and the light blues are 2015-16 NFHS. So you can see 50%, more than 50% of Bihar's population was multidimensionally poor. And now it is reduced. So obviously the high states will reduce more. Now, where are we? Kerala, 0.6, 0.7, Tamil Nadu again 2, 4, like that, 4 to 4%. So how can, very simply put, how can a policy at the central level actually work if this is our this is the level of diversity across the states. These are numbers, how many people have been lifted out of poverty. You can see every state, all these things are in the public domain. So 135 million people have been lifted out of multidimensional poverty between that 2015 to 2021 in 5 years, 6 years. What is more interesting here is that causes of poverty, which I was telling you. So this shows basically how MPI tells us is basically the level of deprivation in the country. Now this is at the country level. The same graph imagine for the state level and the same graph imagine for each of the 700 districts of the country. This is the power of information, power of data that we have at this point of time, which was never computed earlier. So, as I told you, now you can see where should the country attack to improve, to reduce numbers and poverty. This simple. So your cooking fuel, level of deprivation, green is the new and yellow is the old, right? So you can see the deprivation across cooking fuel is still 43%, sanitation is still 30%, housing is 41%. So this is the level of deprivation as on 2021, which is not so late, which is not so far away. Now, this is actually just tells us where do you make streamline interjections in the governments, right? Policy आपको कहाँ बनाना है, किस sector में बनाना है, this is what it tells us. Nutrition again, there won't be any changes in a couple of years or something, it will take time, but these are low-hanging fruits. If you are able to tackle the low-hanging fruits, then obviously people will be lifted out of poverty even faster. So simple, what I said, again localization, this is Nagaland. The same thing for Nagaland, I don't have to it's self-explanatory here, I don't have to say anything. Again, the same chart for Nagaland. So for this chart for the Chief Minister is of vital importance. At the same time, the same chart for all these districts, these 5-6 districts would be very relevant for the district administration and working there. Again, this is the districts, so I'll just go on. Yeah. Now, what did we do? So, ek to hota hai, you create these public policy tools, they become nice fancy reports and then nobody reads them because they are very data heavy, nobody wants to read data heavy numbers. We also create the dashboards along with it, we hope koi to dekh hi lega dashboard. People do, aisa nahi hai. People have, a lot of research papers have come up on multidimensional poverty after we came out with the report and all that. As public servants, what we want to do is we want to make it actionable. How do we make it actionable? We have the MPI committee engaging with states and all that. Yahan tak to I showed you developing the national MPI. This is what is most important. How do we have that reform action plan? So what we did in the reform action plan is we took these 4-5 districts of the red districts, 4 or 5, the worst ones of every state, and we found the diagnostics for each of them. And then we were able to diagnostics for each of these red districts, and then we were able to create something of a reform action plan. Reform action plan karne ka bhi, it's a massive procedure because you have to sit down with those officers of those state and of those districts to understand what is the problem. But this is a simplistic view of what is done over a matter of 3 to 4 days. This takes 3 to 4 days sitting with the officers of every department to do it. Basically to understand, mapping it to the government scheme and to the ministry is one thing, but to understand what is the gap area. The gap area could, the gap area could be manpower gap, it could be a legislation and policy gap, it could be a finance gap, it could be a simple thing like ICDS mein, tablets have been taken, procurement ho gaya, but tablets have not been distributed only. So it could be 100 things, but this is completely localized, completely customized, and it has to be done by the officers and the people in a state and a district themselves. So that was largely the 2 policy areas. What states have done, I've been bragging a lot about what we have done. Let me brag a little bit about how states are also working on the SDGs in a big, big way. So this is how we used to monitor all the states on what they are doing in terms of creating a planning document. पहले होता था 5-year plans होते थे, but 5-year plans अब नहीं होते हैं, but कुछ तो planning होगा, otherwise it is all going to be ad hocism. So some kind of a vision document which is aligned with the SDGs, then coordinating mechanisms, You know, whether the high level is actually, do they have sectoral working groups, do they have adequate insight and reviewing of that, the monitoring and reviewing systems of indicator frameworks, dashboards of ranking of districts, budget aligning and capacity building. So this, I have to tell you this, when we started the work, ye 0001 singular digits mein hota tha, and now fairly everybody is doing it in a big way. So this is the state mein how the institutions work. State legislature, there's a chief secretary level committee everywhere, planning department, line department and all that. What is interesting is, I told you, remember, the first pillar of SDG localization, you have to have independent institutions curated who look after the SDGs, and that is where SDG coordination centers have been functional, have been created and have been functional in the states now. Some pictures, Uttarakhand vision document, the outcome output framework of Haryana. So every state has now kind of moved towards an outcome measuring monitoring framework. They call it by various names. Again, budget allocation of Haryana based on the SDGs, Punjab's state indicator framework, Andhra's reports. So this is the unique, this is what has become very much normal across states of how we rank the states on the SDGs. It is what the states have started ranking their districts, and there's a lot of carrot and stick policies also, you know, incentives hai, punishment hai, blah blah blah. Interesting thing, I'm sure some of you will go to Karnataka, Bangalore, you will realize this, how they are the 2 steps ahead of everybody. So what they have done is, they have created this matchmaking portal where they are bringing money from the private sector, and then they kind of, you know, channelize into SDG impact projects and so on. So this even we couldn't try, we tried and tried, we couldn't do it in Government of India level. So yes, I'll end it with this. Globally, what do we see? Now you can see the globally after COVID, everything was hunky-dory. After COVID, things to became completely haywire. So you can see what has been the impact of COVID on the progress of SDGs. The lower the global south, you see the biggest impacts and the biggest crisis. Now, what has happened? It was reviewed, and what came out in the Secretary General is that only 15% of our 169 targets are on track. Rest are either regressing, severely off track, very gloomy picture. And this, you know, this is like largely like a report card. You can see the greens are visibly small and the reds are massive like. So this is largely the global picture. Also, the big reason, you've heard about COP29, I'm sure, कि बोला गया कि, you know what, 100 million से contribution से in the the developed countries would increase it to what, 300 million. Can you see the actual investment gap in the energy sector? It's 2.2 trillion annual investment gap if targets are to be achieved. So 100 million se increase, okay, it's going to 300 million, peanuts. So this is the major problem also. Globally, this is the picture of, these are the problems that countries are grappling with, especially countries of the South, Asia, Africa, Latin America, in terms of, and that's why the alliance now in G20 Brazilian presidency, that alliance has also been formed, no? The Global Alliance on Hunger and Poverty and so on. Let's see what comes out of it. So this is, yes. So I would like to end with a nice happy picture because yeah, I've given you a lot of gloom. So what we said is that a model is good if it's working. A working model has to yield results. I can make a model, it could be a stagnant model, shows no results, so it's useless then. So we believe that the model of Indian localization has yielded decent results across the years. A lot remains to be done, but you can see the numbers themselves, you know, in the health sector, in the education sector, you can see how improvements have happened. Bigger improvements in the infrastructure and service delivery sector, no doubt, massive numbers in both the financial aspects of it and in the physical infrastructure aspects of it. Largely, I will just end it here. So these are the takeaways, yeah. Obviously, more localized monitoring and no monitoring of expenditure and inputs, but yeah, more focused monitoring on the outcomes which actually matter. Institutions need to be strengthened, institutions' capacities need to be built. building that, bringing in the private sector is a big way, massive amounts of capital, yeah. Employment, innovation, capital. This is the chunk that the private sector holds, which government in no way can kind of, bring in. Finally, what I felt was most important in terms of our experience as public servants, now this is where the public servant in me will come out very strongly. All that work is fine, but unless and until we use the knowledge that is there and convert it into action, that's where the picture changes. Otherwise, what happens is that we also go into, some of us go into a research mode. हम research करेंगे, हम पढ़ेंगे, हम पढ़ाएंगे, हम काम ही करते रहेंगे, हम report ही बनाते रहेंगे. Then there is no impact left if I am not able to kind of bring in the utility, the possible utility that a multidimensional poverty index of a district, or the SDG index of a district and of a state will have in terms of converting that into actionable points. I think that is where the benefit of the use of this entire thing actually it kind of anchors on that. So my point is how we are able to create these acceleration plans and how over the years people are able to institutionalize it. Our country, the difference between, I've done my masters in US, so what we realized is that systems are very strong there. Today I am here, I am not there, somebody else is there, some A, B, C, whoever. The system reigns supreme. But in our country, we are yet to achieve that level of maturity where we create a system and make it so strong that whoever the incumbent is, the systems rule. So that doesn't yet happen. And we do hope that with some kind of and what happens in our country, I'll tell you. My successor will say, oh, cut down her work. So it's just the ulta. So we are very happy in kind of brushing aside and erasing any good work that may remain from a predecessor. That's what the systems need to be strengthened so that these kind of acceleration plans actually happen not merely on paper but also get translated into the ground. This is a snapshot of all our reports that we had come out with. Just a few of them, not all of them, because jada dikhati then it would be like too much of bragging. So this is a little bit of our work. It's all there on public domain as well. So yes, with that, thank you so much. Now over to you.
So I am starting on a lighter note that in your last statement you are saying, so which means that if Yogi ji and Modi ji continue, we can see this, continuity. And but again, that is not my question. My point is, like you have been working in UP, and I consider that to be as much as diverse, and it's like a country. So you must have experienced different experiences with different districts. Now, my question is, something which I feel there are some technological solutions and there are some on the ground, you build communities of practice and, you try to build solutions on that. Now, from your experience, which has been more effective or impactful on the ground? And number two, whether there is a correlation between the literacy and, because you talked about Kerala and all those things, and there is a correlation between literacy and the technological or COPs which I was talking about.
I think it's a very clear cut, there is a massive correlation obviously. That's why the interventions work much better in, let's say, in a Tamil Nadu, in a Kerala or in a Karnataka than in a UP or a Bihar. So that point is a foregone kind of a conclusion. And that is why the challenges in UP are far more. So I left UP in the year 2012 and I came to Government of India around then. That's where I got to see the differences between some states working so proactively and where interventions are the same centrally sponsored scheme is working in a 10,000, in a better capacity than in other states. So even the hill states like Himachal, Uttarakhand has been doing wonderfully. So if you go to the districts, I've worked very closely in the districts also of Himachal. There also that let me say the capability is already there. You don't have to focus on building capability of village level functionaries or district level functionaries to kind of implement a simple intervention. So that kind of a difference, I think that creates a very, the starting point of races become different. So on the other point that you mentioned of building community and building technology, so point blank technological interventions work very strong, and this we have seen technological interventions, whether it's in even in the urban areas, definitely yes, in terms of single stop delivery systems, and now we have in the smart cities, we have the integrated command and control care centers, wherein it's a plethora of, let's say, full technology based sewer management, technology based public ration distribution. Everything is technologically kind of being followed and is being curated also that way. That is great. Community based may issues happen is that community based interventions don't work in the same way across the country. So community based interventions also work better where the level of, let's say, education is high, where the level of empowerment of women is high. So I was just in a village in I was in a village in the district of, in a western UP district of Bagpat. You will not imagine, there were 10 self-help groups of women. You know what they were doing? They were just into dairy. So I asked the women there, what do you do in dairy? Aap paneer banate ho, aap ghee banate ho, aap khoya banate ho? They said, no, we have some buffaloes, we just take the milk and we sell it. What is the point? What is a self-help group doing in that? Now, a similar self-help groups, we want them, kya? Value addition karoge, simple things. So I have seen in Chhattisgarh, near about Raipur, thoda dur, rural areas mein, self-help groups of women making LED bulbs, which is crazy, assembling things, doing mobile repair. So this is the level of, how things work. So community participation works again, everything is linked to that education level. Education, your basic education, if it's faulty, nothing kind of grows on top. The superstructure kabhi banta nahi. That is the issue that we face in some of the northern states. But having said so, digital interventions, technology interventions, they are working in a big way. They have created an impact, but more impact in, say, more promising states where there is some kind of awareness, there is some kind of basic education, higher education, theek hai. Class 12 tak agar logon ne padh liya. Class 12 in UP, the higher education enrollment ratio itself is somewhere like 40% or something, 40-50%. GIAN. So it's all very complicated, it's all linked, they are complete intertwined. So it's like a charcha over chai. Yes, you wanted to ask.
Ma'am, I have a question. Like in the Sustainable Development Goal, we have a objective that is gender equality. So my question is, we often forget about talking about the third gender. So what are the initiatives taken by the government so that the condition of transgenders or the third gender can be improved? Because we have seen in different places and different public places that how they are treated very badly. So yeah, that's my question.
No, I'll give it to you on that. But I will not give it to you on the fact that the third gender is not considered in the SDGs. So we had a full kind of consultation with the LGBTQ++ community, if you remember. So the gender perspective, not women, barring the women, the third gender perspective is already taken into account in reduced inequalities, which is goal 10, and even in goal 5. But the point which you are saying is that what is being done, whatever is being done is quite less compared to what should be done. That's a reality. But indicators and outcome jo targets hain, they include the third gender in both two of these goals, goal 5 also and goal 10 also.
Ma'am, I have one question. That now is coming that bank is not provide loan, small and poor people, that they are enter like microfinance company. They have no license. They only go to remote area like village, and they are provide loan. Nothing to see his CV, and they are provide to loan. And then when they uh, money is not come to from people, that he have got I have loan from banking, then they have got to village people, and it is very uncertain situation. It is very bad for our economy. That one RBI report is says that there are village people, they have not income that he have got how to loan.
So, what is your exactly the question?
What
the
is the
question of
solution?
NPA.
Yes, मेरा क्वेश्चन है मैम, लोगों का इनकम नहीं जितना है उनसे ज़्यादा वो लोन ले रहे हैं, तो
ये तो पूरे यूएस का भी यही प्रॉब्लम है. So we are all following the US model ना. नहीं देखो, this is a massive problem of NPAs. और NPAs में आप खाली बेचारा वो गरीब आदमी को ही देख रहे हो, अमीर आदमियों को भी तो देखो, उनका भी तो NPA हो रहा है. Corporate NPAs are much higher. So this is a very small area of concern where that's where, I mean, if banks are able to reform their own working operations, फिर तो it would have been a different ball game altogether. हाँ, मैं वही कह रही हूँ, ये बेचारा गरीब आदमी को देख रहा है, बड़ा बड़ा NPA भी देखो थोड़ा. Yeah.
Ma'am, I have a question.
Yes.
We have the SDG 13 for climate action, and as you said, the private sector, when we see private companies, it's really difficult for them to inculcate all the new processes and products and all. So we are seeing a chunk of these startups who are coming up with these new ideas like renewable energy, waste management, then green technology. Now, how or what is the role of the government to give them with that adequate capital, because these are all capital intensive, I mean, ideas which can be put into action and they can be converted to big, huge companies dealing with all these. We have a lot number of startups which we are seeing in the DPIIT dedicated to all these three areas. So how, the finance part is taken care of? Because if I see the different levels of the startups, very few are there who are there in the scaling level. All are either in the very seed level and all those pretty ideas. So what is being done?
I think it's a complete question of evolving that entire startup ecosystem over a period of years. I remember Startup India was started somewhere in DPI 2016. Yeah. So my boss in Mr. Amitabh Kant, he was then the secretary of DPIIT, and my husband was director in DPIIT. He was starting that movement, that ease of doing business, Startup India, he was वही देख रहा था. So at that time, if you see, 2016 to 2024, कितने ही साल हुए? We have to give ourselves a time to mature, to go to the level of an Israel or a US. I mean, we are far away. It still has the third largest startup ecosystem in the world. Right. So, yes, it's a beginning. No doubt it's a beginning. It will take time, massive time.
But ma'am, if we take into consideration the climate problems, I mean, what all is happening, there the climate
Accelerate.
is, I mean, the time isn't going to wait.
Yeah.
Every year the global warming, if we see, it's rising.
I have an issue with that actually. I have a personal issue which I generally don't state normally, is that the entire Panchamrit, if you see our net zero targets, net zero by 2070, 500 gigawatts by 2030, 50%, ये सारा चीज़ें. So these targets are on one place, massive targets, very ambitious targets, but we are forgetting one big chunk of area of that just transition. Just transition, kind of, the estimates that we have is that 20 million people in India will lose their livelihoods given this energy transition from a fossil fuel to a non-fossil fuel in the next 10-20 years, which is a massive number. So there's almost like around 2 million people based on coal, another 1.5 million people based on railways, on their livelihoods, And for every one formal job, there are 10, almost 10 informal jobs. This is all IMF estimates. And 20 million people, and which are the states they will lose their jobs? Think about that. Jharkhand, Odisha, West Bengal, right? Chhattisgarh. These are, watch out these states, I am very aghast. These are the states which are always orange and red. So, yahan pe if there's going to be so much of loss of livelihoods, the priority should also take into account, which policy priorities kehte hain na, policy priority should also take into account that retrofitting that existing infrastructure, reskilling these people, and then bringing them back into the RE kind of ecosystem. RE में भी तो है, servicing है, you know, maintenance of grids है, maintenance of batteries है. In सब चीज़ों में भी also one has to get in these people. So that's my bigger problem area in terms of how when we are not doing adequately enough also in that area. So that is one area. But you are rightly saying the targets are very massive. Yeah, but the investment is also not coming, na?
Yes, ma'am. That's what I'm asking. Like, where from the investments? I mean, it requires a lot of investment
so I
out
told
there.
you, in COP29, what happened? GCF committed, the Green Climate Fund committed 100 to 300. Is that 300 adequate? So these are massive questions which need to be, as a global South leader, one needs to kind of negotiate, and at the higher platforms, finance to aap de nahi rahe hain. Technology aap de nahi rahe hain. We are becoming more and more dependent on batteries which are coming again from different countries. So how does one tackle these challenges, not being just one country, but being a part of a block? Because then the negotiating power increases. So startups are there, startups are increasing, they are doing well, but still there's a massive gap. There is a gap. Viksit Bharat is still a tough challenge, yeah. By 2047, we are right now a $3 trillion economy. We aim to become a 5 trillion, which will happen very shortly, you know, by 2027 that should happen. But that entire jump to by that 2047 to an $18 trillion economy, that is going to be a big one. That is going to be a big challenge. And also, how does one raise our per capita income? Challenges तो बहुत है. We love to talk about problems. Solutions तो आप ही लोगों को निकालना है. Academia and business solutions निकालेगी. Government तो problem गिनाएगी.
So, thank you, madam, for this beautiful presentation. And you rightly mentioned that this is the shared responsibility of the government as well as what we are doing here. But believe me, what we are doing here, without touching the reality, we are assuming that all are sitting on moon. So the situation is like this, because the ultimate responsibility is we need to publish. If we are not publishing what we are doing here, then there is question. Our students need to defend their thesis. So the first question comes, how many papers you have published? And then if I'll say that segregation of waste is required at source, so then we are looking for our publication, they will say this is a very common thing, nothing new is there, right? So in that way, the reality is means far away. So again, you mentioned that information is something which is the driving force right now, and then we are usually depending upon the reporting authorities only. So why we are not touching those points where we have automatic sensors and I can just code. I worked with the Rourkela Municipal Corporation, and commissioner there, he happened to be the commissioner of this smart city mission as well. He sent his team to me and he said that we have done this, that work, we are getting so many rewards, but we have not published this anywhere. You please, professor, help us to publish this, whatever we are doing. So I said, okay, we can do that. You give me your report and I'll try to make it happen. So then I said, all these things are there already published. So what is the new here? The new here is what we are doing here in India. So see, you have installed dustbins, right? And then you will see all over the waste is there other than inside the dustbin.
Other than the dust.
So then sometimes dustbin is overflowing, no one is coming. So why we don't have that technology? Just to install the sensor and then we can
Sensor,
find
yes.
that dustbin is full, you need to take it. I worked with one of the, I believe, largest hospital in UP, that is King George Medical Hospital. I think
Lucknow.
at that time, 1,000 bed capacity. So they were actually, they outsourced this waste handling process to some third vendor. And what he was doing, he was carrying the bags and then dropping in somewhere in the forest. Because that disposing
ये
of
यूपी में
final
ही हो
disposal,
सकता है.
this final disposal is very costly. No, this is happening everywhere.
Everywhere.
Because
multiple
that I asked the problem, because hospital was paying 16 rupees per kg to dispose it as per the criteria whatever WHO has defined, and our norms are there. So simple thing is we are not able to track. So after that, what they did, they just attached the chip with that, and then we can dynamically check where that bag is right now. And you believe me, after that segregation and everything, that cost was cut down to 4 rupees per kg, and they started making revenue out of that by recycling the things. So depending upon the reporting authority, only reports are, means once things happen, then we ask the officials to report that, right? So why don't that should be like something predictive is the technology we can
That's
use.
where the
and
technology role
yes.
comes in
So,
a big way. No?
Yeah, like one of the participants also mentioned that manipulative kind of things. So we don't want bad numbers on the screen, right? So
You don't want inflated numbers. You don't want unnecessarily
if
inflated
administrators
values.
also don't want that bad numbers are coming against, because that is obviously so that's
a
maybe
bias.
the reason that a few of the chief minister, they will never like your report, whatever you are reporting.
No, but they have no, now, after a point, once it gets established, they have no choice but to accept it. They can't even fight it, because it was done, everything has their signatures of the chief secretary, everything, they all know how it's done. It's so transparent. That's why transparency becomes very important.
Transparency will come with the technological intervention.
Yes.
That is what is required. So when we are framing policy, I think that is something we need to take care. We can just automate the things up to some extent where we can do that. So
I
thank you
remember
very
the
much.
case of Prime Minister's Awas Yojana, जो पहले इंदिरा आवास होती थी. So in UP or in many states, some districts had these massive CBI inquiries कि आवास सारे houses, you know, Prime Minister's Awas Yojana, houses सारे पेपर में बन गए, पैसा चला गया, जमीन पे तो है नहीं. उसके बाद क्या हुआ? अमरजीत सिन्हा sir became the secretary RD. This was in 2015 something. He got them all geo-tracked. Simple. अब जियो ट्रैकिंग से क्या है, उनके लैपटॉप पे बैठ के दिखता था हमें कि ये हाउस ये बन गया, उसका फोटो. So simple things of technology infusion, at least it improves service delivery, it improves infrastructure quality, and obviously it removes pilferage. So that point is a given. But how far functionaries are also adept at using this, that becomes a very, that's a condition of how much capacity has been built into them. Otherwise, they will only start, you know, kind of manipulating it and subverting it.
But in this context, you know, there are also some union, concurrent and state lists.
Yes.
The powers reside with the state.
Yes.
Like, for example.
Lord, mostly all of them, yeah.
And there also, you know, like you said about the Awas scheme, and, you know, there have been complaints that, you know, this scheme has also been used or manipulated by the ruling, you know, political party there. And genuine ones are not getting that. Okay, and I mean, that's what I've also heard.
Yeah, you've heard rightly so, but we shouldn't discuss it here. We will discuss it over tea.
So, okay.
Yes, please.
Okay. Last question maybe.
So, thank you. So, ma'am, sustainable development is also people responsibility, not only government and state. How can government of India motivate people, or is there any plans or running promote sustainable development in village area or rural area?
So for village area, good question, because this is not entirely my job, it is everybody's job, right? So in the village areas, specifically for villages, there is the Ministry of Panchayati Raj. Now I will talk complete government. So Ministry of Panchayati Raj has that entire domain area of panchayats, village panchayats, and you must have heard there's something called a Gram Panchayat Development Plan, that GPDP was started. GPDP essentially means that the entire village panchayat will actually do their planning bit and allocation of resources bit across different subjects, and they will also collect the revenue. The revenue collection, though, it's again very different in different states. Some places they do, some places they don't. But so during our work in Niti Aayog only, we collaborated with Ministry of Panchayati Raj, and thankfully the secretary was UP Kada, so I was able to convince him, and we were able to work together in terms of developing an entire monitoring framework for SDG mature panchayats. So now that started, but it didn't kick off too much, because and then in that, if I tell you, only 6 things were selected. वाटर का था, एक वाटर एंड सैनिटेशन का था, एक एग्रीकल्चर का था, एक हेल्थ एंड न्यूट्रिशन का था, एक एजुकेशन का था, एक इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर का था. These were the 6 areas on which because for them everything doesn't matter. At the village level only 6 or 7 key themes matter, and environmental का भी था कुछ. So then different states did very differently on that. States like Kerala, have a look at zero carbon footprint villages. They went off to that level of the competition was so high that several villages went off to zero carbon footprint. We can't imagine that in many places that where we come from or where we work. So that mechanism then that was followed by a massive training of Gram Panchayat secretaries and pradhans or sarpanchas, whatever you may choose to call them, at NIRD in Hyderabad, where they were taught ki ye kaam hona hai, you have to have your GPDP like this, you have to see. All this also requires a lot of filling information. So giving information at Gram Panchayat, the southern Gram Panchayats will do very well, the northern may not even be able to do this. So that kind of a problem crept in. Eventually what happened, wo zyada take off nahi kiya. But then jisko karna hota hai, driven Gram Panchayat leaders, they do it. So the southern states did very well, the northern states again went. But people wala, that is an important point. So people wale mein there are ad hoc things. So government alone really can't get into all people. No, it's a very difficult ball game altogether. So for engaging people only, we engaged with those 1,000 CSOs in those different communities, working in different communities, especially the marginalized communities, LGBTQ, PWD, farmers, women, children, aged. So through them we were, and then a certain amount of we were able to kind of give some amount of money also to them कि आप भी इस तरह के advocacy groups बनाइए, आप भी इस तरह के consultations कीजिए. तो ये अभी again this whole thing has started again now from January onwards. Again this the consultative process with the marginalized community workers will now start again. So this is how, but it's not too much. Yeah, government does scaling up at government level. And tries to bring in the private sector, ki kar lo, kuch bhi kar lo.